Our distinguished speaker needs no introduction. Lord David Owen, of course, was Foreign Secretary at the tender age of 38. Used to know that. He is the founder and leader of the Social Democratic Party, now a crossbencher in the Lords, an extremely prolific author. Oh, I didn't mention he was the EU's special envoy to the former Yugoslavia, wrote a fascinating book about it. Here is his most recent book, The Hubris Syndrome, which very interestingly combines his expertise on the world of politics and his medical training, because he is a trained medical doctor. Hubris Syndrome. He is also the rector of the University of Liverpool, and I think he'd be a strong candidate for submission to the research assessment exercise with all the books he's written. His title is slightly different than advertised. The title advertised was the development of the EU's foreign policy. He wants to talk a little bit about the limits to European integration. With that, I give you Lord Owen.
Good afternoon. There's a podcast, is that right?
That's right.
Does that mean it's just verbal, or that there is a camera around?
I'm here.
There's a camera over there. Well, let me start. I will talk about Europe's foreign policy, because that is the area where I believe it's most essential to have limits set. I'm a strong supporter of the European Union, and have been all my political life. I remember fighting in 1964 general election as the Labour candidate in a hopeless seat, and the Liberals' foreign affairs spokesman, Mark Von Carter, was there. By the end of the election period, I think the general view was the only person who was in favour of Europe was the Labour candidate, whose party was nominally against, and the Conservative and the Liberals had put so many reservations down that they were effectively against. And I remained, all the time I was in the Labour Party, a very solid believer. And it was when I was Foreign Secretary that we established, I think, as the sensible guidelines for a Britain in Europe, which is that we should be a constructive and committed supporter, but that we are not prepared to be taken into a situation where certain key areas of national governance are so eroded that you effectively have a European position rather than a national position. And that particularly affects foreign policy, but in my judgment it also affects some areas of criminal justice. So in 1977 I was a very great advocate of Spain coming into the European Union. I had never been a visitor to Spain because of its Franco existence. I was a strong supporter of Portugal coming in, which had only that recently really come out from Salazar. And I was a great supporter of Greece coming in, which had managed to ditch the junta. And it is important to remember that all-important enlargement to Greece, Spain and Portugal, which had very little obvious at that time economic benefit to the European community, was driven by politics and driven by a belief that EU membership would give them the democratic underpinning not to revert back to that type of fascist junta type government. That has been completely and absolutely vindicated. What was more interesting was the Commission were very hesitant about Spain, because remember, fascist governments often have very state-run economies, and they thought there would be difficulty with Spain integrating economically. Well, in retrospect, that looks ridiculous. I mean, it has been one of the most successful economic integrations. I'm a great Greekophile. I have a house in Greece, and looking at the changes that are taking place all the time in Greece, you can see how much EU membership has meant. And when I was chairman of the International Conference on the former Yugoslavia from 1992 to 1995, one of the only cards we had in our quiver, really, or there was no readiness to really use substantial force, was the potential offer of coming into the European Union. which certainly with the Croats, whatever their political persuasion, was important. To some extent, the Bosniaks was always only an element in Serbia that was interested in it. But of course in Macedonia was extremely important, Montenegro was extremely important, and above all in Slovenia, which is now of course holding the presidency of the European Union. So on the political case for Europe, I don't need any persuasion. Also, when I was Foreign Secretary, we started on what was called political cooperation, which was the first element of what is now a common foreign and security policy. And to those who are purists on either side, who want either a fully integrated European foreign policy with a European foreign minister and the whole works, or those who are antipathetic to any type of involvement of Europe in foreign policy, I say a very simple thing. We're never going to have world government. That is an idealistic objective for some people, but it's never going to happen. But if we're going to make the United Nations work and all these other international institutions work effectively, regional groupings are a very important thing, and some inner discipline and momentum to reach agreements and consensus within those regional groupings. And by far the most significant is the European Union. And as far as getting friends and getting unity through consent, it's not a bad idea to start with the neighbours of the world. So it seems to me you can always have these dreams of valuable organisations, and I'm one who remains of the view of the Commonwealth as a valuable organisation for this country. But the European Union is on our doorstep. This is an area where we are very close to them, and it seems to me quite logical and rational that Britain should contribute in foreign policy, that we did not just join the common market, we did join an organisation which had an aspiration to, in terms of the then treaty, which was of ever-growing unity. But if it was also a Europe of member states, there had to be limits to that ever-growing unity. And here, I think, is the real problem with Europe. For perfectly legitimate reasons, and I can respect it, even though I disagree with it, there are a substantial number of elitists in Brussels whose driving motive is to take the process of ever-growing unity to the point of true union. Now, as I say, you can't rule that out. We live in a world where people are allowed to have different views. That's part of democracy. But there is a perfect legitimacy in saying there must be limits to this. I find myself now in a most extraordinary situation in British politics. I'm 69, and of course never far now. But I have to argue that limits is part of membership of the European Union. By any standards of honesty of what we have sold to the British people, we have, from 1960 onwards, this debate has been with us in this country. And every single political leader, with possible